Welcome! Join us to learn about DC Silver Jackets and their recent efforts to understand and reduce flood risk in far northeast Ward 7. The DC Silver Jackets are a team of government and academic partners from universities and local, regional, and federal agencies. In 2017, the Silver Jackets kicked off the Watts Branch Flood Risk Management Study to assess current and future flood risk for far northeast Ward 7. Identify opportunities to reduce flood risk, and to increase public awareness of the issue. They leverage the latest data and technologies to develop new flood modeling and mapping, which helps us better understand where and how deep flooding could occur in the Watts Branch. We're going to review the study's key findings and its short and long-term recommendations. But first, let's talk about flood risk in the Watts Branch. Why did the Silver Jackets study Watts Branch for flood risk? To explain why, we must consider the land's history, its topography, its current development, and its future. Until the mid-20th century, the Watts Branch watershed was primarily an agricultural area. Today, the watershed is highly urbanized. As the area developed in the 1950s, the Watts Branch, a tributary of the Anacostia River, was narrowed and channelized to make way for buildings and roads. With more urbanization, land that once allowed the soil to absorb rain is now covered with buildings and pavement. Rain falling on these areas becomes runoff. The volume of the runoff from big storm events is more than Watts Branch can handle. The surrounding topography and watershed characteristics make communities along the Watts Branch's banks particularly vulnerable to flooding, which can occur quickly and without a lot of warning. The history of flooding in Watts Branch is not well documented, but we do know that in August 1933, a significant flood occurred. Water rose to the level of fire hydrants, flooding roads and basements and stranding cars. If you live or do business in the communities around Watts Branch, you may have seen the large-scale stream restoration projects over the last 20 years. Despite important improvements to the health of the Watts Branch stream, the flood risk remains. On September 10, 2020, an intense rainfall brought 3 to 4 inches of rain in just 2 hours, causing the Watts Branch stream to rise and overflow. Hay Street, Galt Place, and Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue were all flooded, causing building and vehicle damage throughout the community. Over the next century, climate change is expected to increase the intensity and frequency of extreme precipitation events, putting additional stress on infrastructure and increasing flood risk. Watts Branch is identified as a priority area in the district's climate change adaptation plan because of its combination of low-lying, flood-prone areas, high-density structures, and critical infrastructure with vulnerable populations, including affordable and public housing developments. A flood in an area with vulnerable populations can have a devastating impact on residents. The Watts Branch Flood Risk Management Study included new flood modeling by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, using the latest technology. The modeling and associated flood maps were updated to display the present and future flood risk, including a look ahead to consider climate impacts in 2080. This study improves upon the 2010 Washington, D.C. flood insurance study, with better accuracy and future scenario analysis. Data collected to create these revised flood models included field surveys of bridges, streams, and stormwater facilities, the latest digital ground elevations for the district, updated rainfall statistics, land use information, and blueprints of recent developments. DOEE conducted surveys in 2018 to gather detailed building elevation information for 70 flood-prone buildings. These surveys help to estimate where water could enter a property during a flood, and these properties were provided with National Flood Insurance Program elevation certificates, which are official FEMA documents that can be used for determining flood risk and insurance premiums. There is still substantial risk of flooding throughout far northeast Ward 7. New modeling shows over 200 buildings in the 100-year floodplain. DOEE will submit the new modeling to update flood insurance rate maps in the area, which may make certain property owners eligible for lower flood insurance premiums. While the new modeling shows a decrease in structures vulnerable to a 100-year flood, The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers also studied what the floodplain could look like in the future. Climate change projections for future rainfall in the 2080s indicate a substantial increase in overall flood risk, with the new modeling showing over 400 buildings in the 100-year floodplain throughout the course of the study. Conversations with stakeholders made it clear that nuisance flooding is often observed in neighborhoods a good distance away from the Watts Branch stream, likely due to aging infrastructure that was not designed for these significant rainstorms. Although detailed surveys were not conducted on the stormwater pipe network, the model can be further refined in the future by conducting these surveys and integrating the updated data into the model. With new flood modeling and mapping completed for the study area, the team moved to the next phase of the study, which included developing a set of options to reduce risk and an outreach strategy for increasing flood risk awareness throughout far northeast Ward 7. This will be further discussed in part 2 of this module.